today. All right, so I wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement from our UCR Native Studies faculty. In the spirit of Rupert and Jeanette Costo's founding relationship to our campus, we would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Kwahia, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting places home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. And when I offer this recognition, I don't want it to just be a kind of checking of the box, but something for us to really think through, especially in connection with our conversation today, with its resonances of discussing violence, genocide, and also the importance of stories as we keep going forward and remember our histories. So Lauren Yee's play, Cambodian Rock Band, opens with a rousing concert, and hence us sharing some music from the show. And it tunes audiences into the sounds and stories of Cambodians and Cambodian Americans. When Neri seeks justice for the crimes of the Khmer Rouge, she discovers the complicated past of her father, Chum. A musician, Chum had become a target of Pol Pot's regime, yet his songs save him. A memory play, Cambodian Rock Band not only replays Chum's life in Cambodia, but also serves as an aesthetic, political project of remembering for multiple audiences, from Cambodian refugees to white Americans, more typical of US regional theater patrons. Some spectators may know Cambodian rock, dengue fever, and the Khmer language, while others may have Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin' as their only touchstone. And then at the finale, the cast encourages spectators to clap, dance, and sing along, joining in embodied ways to refuse the erasures of Cambodian people, history, and culture. All right, so let me introduce our fabulous speakers for today. We have Brooke Ishibashi, a fourth-generation Japanese American. Brooke hails from a showbiz family from Southern California. She originated and developed the role of Neri in Cambodian Rock Band and is passionate about exploring anti-racism, social justice, and transgenerational trauma. She is co-founder of the grassroots lobbying organization, Be a #ArtsHero, a core member of Fair Wage on Stage, and National Counselor for Actors Equity Association. Joe No is an actor, writer, and musician originally from the Los Angeles area. Most notable for his performance as Chum in Cambodian Rock Band by Lauren Yee, for which he received an Obie Award. His other credits include Viet Gone at Studio Theater in Washington, D.C., King of the Yees, which is another great Lauren Yee play, at Baltimore Center Stage and ACT Seattle, The White Snake at Baltimore Center Stage, and most recently, the English voice of, is it Kun? I don't know how to pronounce that great, in the G-Kids/Netflix animated feature Funan. Joe also currently serves as a Western Regional Delegate for Actors Equity. And finally, our moderator for today, Brian B. Sengdala. He is a PhD student in the Department of Performing and Media Arts at Cornell University, researching Cambodian and Asian American studies, race, performance, sound, music, memory, and disability. Thinking about performance as memory work, he studies how second-generation Cambodian and Asian American artists imagine histories marked by silences caused by lost archives of things, peoples, and memories. While he was previously a performing musician, he is now focused on his public work with Khmer survivors who migrated through Khao I Dang and other Thai refugee camps. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who will start off with some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Let's go.
Everyone, oh my gosh, it's so great to be here. with the fabulous Brooke Ishibashi and Joe Ngo, and of course, our wonderful host, Donatella Galella. Thank you so much to Dr. Galella for organizing us and gathering us here today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with everyone here, with Dr. Galella's class, and with some wonderful friends and familiar faces. And, you know, I hope we get a good conversation going both here and maybe in the chat, and some questions going as we go along. So first, let me bring it back to both Brooke and Joe in inviting you to talk more about your characters in the play, and afterwards we can talk about their relationship to one another.
Joe, do you want to start with Chum?
Sure. So my name is Joe Ngo. I play Chum in a Cambodian rock band, or I have played Chum in a Cambodian rock band. I'm not doing it right now. Yeah, I've been playing this role for a while. I've gone through essentially all the major production versions of it and helped develop it at South Coast Rep. That's where Brooke and I started working on the play a long time ago. Helped develop and create it. I've been working on this play now for arguably close to 6 years, I suppose. My roots in connection to this play were that Lauren Yee was a friend of mine and a collaborator. I had worked on King of the Yees with her prior to Cambodian Rock Band and helped develop that. And Lauren all of a sudden brought up this play that she was writing. Before it was titled something else, but Cambodian Rock, what it became was Cambodian Rock Band. And yeah, she found out that I was Cambodian, and it took off from there. And you know, one thing led to another. She found out that I also played the guitar. Like, it just sort of, all the magic sort of sprinkled into that moment. And I have not been able to walk away from this play since. And you know, I guess that's sort of like what you wish for and what you deserve as well. Like, it's both a great thing and sometimes a desperately difficult thing. But here we are. Yeah.
I want to add to that too, Joe, because I think whenever we would do talkbacks at SCR, La Jolla, or OSF or whatnot, what is, I think, most astounding to people who come to see the show is that a lot of the development of the show came from stories from Joe's parents and their family members. And so it's when he says that he has a close association with the show, it is his blood, but it's also coming directly from experiences from Joe's family.
Yeah, that's right. So when we were developing the play, Lauren, you know, like, she went through a million different versions of the play, but when we first started working on it, so she had the play before she, you know, like, we started working on it together, and she brought this play, and when she found out that I was Khmer, I essentially was like, yeah, my parents are survivors of the Khmer Rouge, and so she asked me if I would be willing to sit with her and just like be used as a source. And so then one of the big initial workshops was I just sat with her for several hours in a restaurant, and we just talked and talked and talked, and I gave her all these family stories. And so she began to develop, you know, the characters' relationships, cadence, you know, the ability to survive. And so I served as arguably, like, I wouldn't say a dramaturg, but anecdotal dramaturg for how people were able to survive, and certain things that like didn't make it into the play, and certain things did, and but there was always the truth of cultural history in that background, right? Like, we talked about all sorts of stuff, from like Cambodian donut shops to karaoke, to live band karaoke, to any, like, all that sort of stuff. And so all those ideas at one point or another had slipped in and out of the play, and it is what it is today. But yeah, so we've had all those conversations essentially, and so she formed the play around that.
Excellent, thank you.
So in terms of my background with the show, I came on board around 2015 or 16, Joe. When we were I don't remember.
It's
Late
got to be
20,
like 16, yeah, 2016.
yeah.
Yeah.
We were, at that point, Lauren was commissioned by South Coast Repertory in Southern California to work on the play. And Joe had been working on different iterations of it before, prior to that. And at that point, Maya Dralas, our friend, was directing the incarnation of it and brought a bunch of us on board with Lauren. And we never auditioned for it. It was really just piecing together people that Lauren and May knew, who they knew played different instruments or were of a different specific age range or had specific qualities or whatnot. And then we slowly, over the course of a couple workshops at South Coast Rep, we formed the band. And at one point, I think we were doing the Pacific Playwrights Festival at South Coast Repertory. And we looked at each other, and I think that was the moment when we realized, oh my God, like the cyclos just formed. It was something that was beyond our control. And there was a moment, I think the Pacific Playwrights Festival was at South Coast Rep. It's a national festival presenting new works. And it was a staged reading essentially, but there were about 500 people in the audience. And we were, performing at music stands and reading off of our pages. But there was a moment when we finished, and there was like this surge that swept through the entire room that felt like it was something that was bigger than us. And I think that was the first moment for me. And I think I could probably speak on behalf of the band too, when we realized that we had a responsibility to a story that was much greater than us. And so from that point forward, it was a vow of sorts to be the torchbearers for to tell the story as best we could, and it became a responsibility for a good amount of time, where the band, it was like a promise that we made to ourselves and to each other and to the survivors that we met, and the families that we established relationships with, like your mom, Brian, and then everything else kind of evolved from there. Yeah.
It's for the rest of the gang that are all here. It's a well-known secret by the cast of Cambodian Rock Band that maybe the only person on this planet that loves this show more than I do is my mother. For sort of the people that are getting to know Cambodian Rock Band better, and we'll be experts soon on it. Could you flesh out Chum and Nyeri for us, and talk about your characters, and talk about their relationship with each other, because it brings up quite a bit in the plot, doesn't it?
You want to start, Dad?
Yeah, sure. I'm only a few years older than Brooke, but I play her dad in the play, and because the play takes place across time spans, and as Brian sort of said, Brian and Donatella set us up. It is a play about memory, so the character Chum, who I play, jumps back and forth between being anywhere this play states like 18 to in his 20s to 50. So it's the relationship between so the whole premise of the play is essentially based on this shared relationship, this relationship and this shared memory that's being passed, like this moment that sort of changes their dynamic of their relationship. How do I better express that? So okay, the plot wise, Nyeri goes to Cambodia to work on war crimes tribunals in order to seek some sort of justice that she feels. And I would say that there is intergenerational trauma associated with that, and she's trying to resolve something for herself. And the play takes that to a physical realm. It takes it to a metaphorical physical realm in which her father actually shows up, and through their fact finding is forced to reveal his past. And so that's why the character Chum jumps into the past. You have to find out what happened to him in order for Nyeri, who sort of is the stand-in for the audience, the child survivors, to acknowledge and recognize and reconcile what is happening between her relationship with her father and Cambodian Americans' relationships with Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge and what happened. And so it's not just a family story of, it is definitely a family story of the reparation of relationships that are so difficult between the children of survivors. You know, like as if a regular relationship between parents is not hard enough. The children of survivors, that relationship is so much more difficult because there's always this disconnect in terms of the trauma. And so it's both that physical manifestation of that and sort of reconciling memory and reconciling all this loss. And so that's like their relationship is the play in a nutshell. And then you get to go through their connection with music and their connection to each other through music and the connection that they have with each other because they share a pain that they both don't know about. I'll just say that, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that by saying I think from Neri's perspective, it is a lot about identity, right? And Brian and Joe and myself, we can all relate as children of a lineage that has gone through different kinds of trauma. So for me in exploring a character like Neri, you know, she's a young woman, late 20s, 26, second generation Khmer American, and in a position where she doesn't really know very much about her father, and she doesn't know there are secrets and there's a closed door that I think in essence informs or doesn't inform her own sense of self, right? Because if you don't have that access to your parents and their trauma and that sense of transparency, then there's a certain part of yourself that will never really truly be known. So for me, a lot of the journey of exploring a character like Neri and a relationship with Joe's character Chum, my father, is identity or lack thereof, and how transgenerational trauma informs that. Because, you know, as Asian Americans, there is the sense of model minority. There's a sense of wanting to excel, to please immigrant parents, to go above and beyond. And so there's already that dynamic at play with someone like Neri, who just wants her father's approval and love and respect. But it's also the sense of not really truly knowing who you are, because there's a gateway that that's just locked, that you can't access. And so the journey for me was figuring out what that looked like, and a lot of that just had to do with the work between Joe and myself.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the sort of keys, as it were, in this place, in this play, is the position of music. Music plays such a large role. I mean, it's called Cambodian Rock Band for a reason. You all are bandmates, the Ciclos, as it were. You know, so can you tell us more about the role of music in this play, what music does and what music sort of gives us access to, especially in your relationship as Neri and Chum, and also potentially as Sotia as well, right? Yeah.
Something that always sticks with me is when we were working on this play in the very early stages, Auntie Tina, Joe's mom, would come in and she would coach me on the Khmer, and she would help with music and with dancing, etc. And she was like our cultural expert. And I remember talking to Joe and Auntie Tina at one point, and we were talking about Chnamon Dapramoy, I'm 16, which is like, you know, what is the equivalent, Joe, of in America? It's like, for this generation, it would be like the most popular Ariana Grande song, or, you know, like the most popular pop song that everyone knows and loves, right? So we were talking about this song, and I remember at one point Joe and Tina remarking that the song is so iconic because it's so beloved, but beyond that, it represents a time when everything was good. It was before everything went sour. And so the idea that this piece of music could unlock something in a culture of people that represented the good times, that represented everything they had before it was all taken away, a way of living that was unburdened and that was innocent in a way. I think there was something very beautiful about that to me. And the first time we had a Khmer Family Day at South Coast Rep, it was an audience full of Khmer survivors and their families and students. And I was worried, and some of the castmates were worried because we thought that there would be a lot of PTSD, and we were worried that we were worried about how the survivors and their families would react to the show. And I remember when Joe sang Champa Batambang, and the Khmer audience members started singing along. and it was elders and everyone singing full voice, and it wasn't somber, it was celebratory. So this very somber moment in the show became something beautiful and celebratory. And that was the first moment for me where I realized that music for the Khmer people was a sense of rebellion in a lot of ways, but it was also a way of celebrating life and a way of expressing the joy of what it means to be alive. And that's something that I've really learned from Joe's family and all of the Khmer community members that we've met over the years, is that the music lived on, the music that they weren't able to destroy, like it survived. And that's something that still gets passed down from generation to generation. And it felt like the expression to me felt like it was a gratefulness for life. And that was overwhelmingly beautiful and profound to me. So that's what I find in that.
That's so well put. I don't know if I have anything to add. Yeah, I'll add two things maybe. Yeah, for Khmer people, man, music is life. Music is life. Even to this day, like if you go down to Long Beach, which is like the largest Cambodian community out in the United States, if you go out to any restaurant out there, the Dragon House, Hak Hang, like you can go on a Sunday afternoon or, throughout the night, and there will be people singing. Like it's like big parties, but it's just like a restaurant where you get noodles, right? And it's such a big deal to the Khmer community to have that thing that sort of still unites people. My parents, I'll admit, pre-COVID, and this is not like sad for them because this was their community, every Wednesday still used to have Angkar Dancing Club, which is a thing that they helped found, and it's like a local Chinese restaurant or whatever, big banquet hall. And my parents and all their survivor friends go out there and they dance like every Wednesday night. And it's like a big fun thing. So it's really united them and kept them sane and alive throughout throughout whatever. So yeah, music is life for a lot of Khmer people. The other thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, was the fact that we are so touched by this music because it does represent a time before. Just the history of it on its own. Like Brooke mentioned that my mom immediately, I'm 16. When we first picked that song, when Lauren was like, oh, I want to pick I'm 16, I was like, Mom, do you like, I was like, I remember this song. And then I was like, Mom, do you remember this? And she's like, of course I remember this song. And she immediately sang all the words to it, knew every, the lyrics that other people don't know. They only know the first part, they don't know the second part. And she sang all of it. And then she's like, oh, I can't believe you're doing this song in the show. I was around that age, or I think she was younger then. So she was like, oh, 16 feels older, right? So she was 12 or 13 and was like, that's my song. So it was the hit. And it did remind them of a day before the Khmer Rouge turned the country upside down. Because, even in the music alone, we feel a familiarity with it as Americans too, because it's not that different actually. All the styling, all that rock and roll, French New Wave, it sounds like something that could have come out of here, except for the Khmer that's being sung, really. It's no different than American rock and roll. It's not that far from American rock and roll, especially since a lot of it is California surf. So yeah, it just reminds you of how like Western even, and like well, I don't even know what the word is, but like modern, like Phnom Penh and Cambodia was before the fall. So yeah, it really just takes us back to that time before.
Something that was a harsh moment of realization for me, Brian, was when we were working on the show and when we were doing early workshops. At one point, we were meeting Joe's parents and we were hearing stories, and I pieced it together that at the same time, my parents who are musicians, they met in my dad's R&B band in the 70s in LA, and they were playing at Disneyland on in the showrooms in Disneyland, and they were gigging all over Southern California, and they were the same age as Joe's parents, maybe a little older. Mm-hmm. But there was a moment when I realized that my parents were free to live their lives as musicians in America at the same time in the late 70s, when Joe's parents were literally trying to survive labor camps in the Khmer Rouge at the end of those years. So it was a very harsh moment for me to realize that if it was, it's like wrong time, wrong place kind of thing. If my parents were artists in Cambodia, they would have been killed. Almost all of the artists were killed. So it wasn't very long ago. When we think about World War II, or we think about, chapters past, there's a certain distance we have when we look at history, because a lot of those people have since passed on, or it seems like it was generations ago, but this was our parents' generation. So this is, when we see history repeating itself, this chapter in our world's history was not very long ago. It was in our parents' lifetime. So it was very sobering for me to understand that that was very close to home, because I think so often when we study history, when we study art, there is a sense of distance when you just see names and facts and dates on a page. But this made it a lot more human to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I kind of want to tie both of your discussions together about music in the scene of the concert that happens after the play, which is just so much fun. But for those of us that have been at the play and been able to see this, there's a moment of there's a moment of tension with some of the audience members, right? On, wow, what an amazing play. I just saw an incredible array of, drama, and this story is so powerful. It really is. But for many people, this is their, sometimes it's the first time they've really come into contact with this story embodied on the stage, right? So I remember bringing one of my friends over, and I told him about my research and everything, and I told him my family story, but seeing the play for the first time for him really made it real, as it were, right? And so we get into this sort of odd tension between some audience members, where this invitation to a concert for someone like myself, and for my mother, who gave me no choice but to get up and dance, right? Yeah, I think you may have seen that, but she grabbed my arm and was like, "We're dancing now," And I was like, "Yeah, no question. I'm gonna dance with you. Chichnam Onda Pramoy. This is my jam," But there's this like sort of tension in Reed, which kind of makes me think, one, an invitation to like Khmer celebration of what music is for us, what music does for us, right? And pointing to more life and celebration. And so I wonder if you have any words for those who are thinking about those tensions, right? Like that invitation to be like, come on and dance with us,
I mean, from a purely like technical perspective, the encore was born out of I think the Pacific Playwrights Festival, where we finished the reading and then people wanted more music. So So we ended and it was like a standing ovation. Then we left and people were like, more music. And we were like, we don't know any other songs. So I think at that point, it was when Lauren was like, we should have an encore. We're like, what if people don't want an encore, Lauren? And so she literally wrote it into the show. Like now there's an encore, whether you like it or not, that's written into the show. I will say that tension, Brian, you know, and I can't speak for everyone, but I will say that from almost every Khmer survivor or family member or student who I've spoken to has enjoyed the sense of celebrating the culture and the life and the music and honoring the people who honoring those who were killed. I will say that if I have experienced any kind of resistance, it is mostly from white people, frankly. And for me, it feels like a sense of shame in that a lot of people who see the show for the first time don't actually know that this happened. A lot of them don't actually know the size and the scope of what happened. That these community members are still grappling with the ramifications and the consequences of the genocide today. So I think for a lot of people who are seeing the show for the first time, there's a deep sense of shame that they shouldn't be celebrating after hearing a story like that. And rightfully so, I understand that sentiment, but I will say for myself, the encore was always the highlight of the show for me, and where I felt the most in service to those who perished, because it felt like that was our way of breaking the fourth wall. It was our way of saying we are the artists who are now here to celebrate this music, to celebrate this culture, and to honor those who were lost. And so it felt like a separate thing to me. For me, it felt like that was no longer the play Cambodian Rock Band. That was the artists who are coming together to say this is our way of honoring you and lifting up your music and sharing your music with the world. So that's what it was for me.
I would say the same thing actually for me too. The concert part of the thing, yeah, it did totally come out of Lauren wanting more music. But also, yeah, I would say the same thing. It's also has always been my moment to sort of breathe a sigh of relief and then also give the play back to the people. Not that it's ours, not that we're on stage, it's ours, you know, it's always theirs, but it's a reminder to say like, this has always been yours. And the music being that, to like give them an actual show and let them all dance and sing and breathe a sigh of relief. I know I've told this story a million times. I'm going to tell the OSF kids story again, but at OSF, and I've told this before, but there were like a bunch of student groups that were invited to come see the show, and despite the older white folks, and I don't want to mean to call older white folks out all the time, but yeah, older white folks had some resistance to the play, or why their resistance, I think, has to do with either guilt, shame, maybe, or the fact that they're like, why are we celebrating after such a horrible thing happened, right? And at the same time, when these kids came to see the show, we put on this rad concert, and at OSF there's a dance floor, essentially like the floor of the stage. We invited all these kids to come down and dance, and so they all came out and they were dancing on the dance floor. We took our bows and we left the thing, and our stage manager essentially over the comms was like, the kids on the dance floor, they stopped dancing, and then they started crying, and then they started hugging each other. And I was like, that is the kind of emotional resilience and honesty and truth that should be drawn out from this play. Like, and I think that's the thing that like older Khmer people get to come and see the play and get from that innately. Like they understand, like, we don't have to explain this moment to you, but it's the people who are sort of like, have built up something else, who are like, I don't get it and I don't like it. But mostly people who are sort of emotionally honest or like capable of seeing that, they see it. And I think that the kids on the dance floor is the perfect example of that.
And speaking a little bit more to the power of music, Brian, you know, there was something so profound about the effect of telling a story through, you know, a fictional story through theater, through make-believe, but weaving in the element of a real life rock concert, and what that unleashed with the Khmer people that we met. Because I had never experienced, I didn't anticipate this, and I've never experienced anything like it. And it was the first time I understood the power of art and its literal capacity to help heal people. I remember in early audiences at South Coast Repertory with our Khmer family days, we would finish the show, and you know, during the show, the Khmer elders and the families would sing aloud along. You know, and it's theater, like you're not supposed to do that in theater, but like they would actually sing along during the whole play. Whenever there was a Khmer song, they would sing aloud, and it was awesome. But then after the show, we would do talkbacks, and then we would come outside and we would spend time with everyone, which became a ritual for us. Is after every show, we would stay, the whole cast, the whole band would stay after and just hear people's stories and connect with survivors and talk about how people who lived during that time period, and it was our way of creating space through this play. And when we did this at South Coast Rep, survivors would, they would just grab all of us and they would just tell their stories to our faces. And for a lot of them, their family members were there with them. And they said this was the first time that they'd ever shared these stories with anyone, or they'd ever said the words out loud. And to me, that was shocking. And it was very overwhelming. But then I remember one woman specifically who came, who stood up at a talk back, and she shared that her first husband was a prisoner at S21 and did not survive. And her son, who was younger than us, was probably in his early 20s, stood up next to her in this talk back in a room full of strangers and said that he didn't know that had even happened, that this was the first time he'd ever heard the story from his mother in a room full of strangers. And then we would go out into the lobby and we would talk to folks. And I have so many dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of memories of survivors like grabbing me by the shoulders and saying, this is what happened to me. This is how I saw my loved ones get killed. And then they would say, will you please, you need to keep telling our story. You need to keep sharing our music. And so then it felt like it became something that we maybe didn't even know we were getting ourselves in that deep. But at that point, it became like a responsibility to the six of us to I think, like I said, bear a torch for a group of people. And so when I think Joe said this a couple minutes ago, when we do the encore, it is I think the artist's way of honoring the people and the music and the culture and their history, because I'm not Khmer, and so and I can't pretend to be Khmer. And so the fact that Joe is the only Khmer person in our original cast, you know, it was for us, it was a large responsibility to honor them and to pay that service to them, because we are not Khmer. And so I think for me, it was a way to the encore was a way for Brooke to then, you know, be the vessel to say thank you, essentially.
Thank you. So there's yet another encore that happens after the encore, right? There's Cambodian Rock Band's music is still being made through efforts like the Cambodian Rock Band Challenge, #CRB Challenge. But there's also this want in the work that you're doing, Brooke, with the Be an Arts Hero, with your campaigning and your lobbying. And let's move on to this discussion of activism and the arts in activism. And here's another powerful way of, you know, us using music, or us focusing on music and arts sort of in general, and sort of the powerful moves that both of you are so involved in. And so if you could talk to us a little more about your projects, and if you can sort of, you know, get us organized and get us going and tell us what we can do to help you out.
Joe, do you want to talk about CRB Challenge?
Sure. I mean, Brooke is the real organizer. I just put a fun thing together. But okay, yeah, I'll talk about CRB challenge. Earlier when Donatella was doing the introductions, it's so funny that like I couldn't help but think about like this sort of apoliticalness that sometimes artists try to approach their theater with, or this like making art with. And so like the CRB challenge was born out of, so the album had just dropped, and then, you know, weeks went by or whatever, and no news, you know, like we're deep in COVID and like nothing's happening. And Lauren wanted to like get back in touch with fans. Like she kind of was like I just want to let them know that like CRB will be back, you know. And so she kept floating this idea to me for like what ended up being months of like, hey, should we do this CRB challenge, this thing that you know, we'll just invite people to start recording songs and doing music videos and sorts of, and we'll just share them across this platform that she was like, how about we just call it CRB TV, and then we'll just like show the videos and invite people who have been connected to CRB to like talk about it. So not a huge idea. It was really honestly just for fun. And Lauren had brought that up, of course, and when we were thinking about launching it, it was when George Floyd was murdered and the protests began. And so Lauren was like, so what do you think? And I'm grateful for this. Lauren has come to me as I'm like a little bit of her political activist, more of an activist friend. And so she's like, you know, cool, not cool. And I was like, not cool. Like, I was like, not the time. I was like, this is not about us right now. This is not the conversations we should be having, right? Like, this is time to support the movement for Black lives. It's not about us. And so we continued on, you know, like so she would check in with me, you know, and I give her credit for the fact that she's like sitting at home with her baby and she's probably like going crazy. She's like, I need something to do. So she checks in with me, you know, after a month, is like, now is it the time? Now is it the time? And this conversation continues to go. And eventually when things settle down a little bit, I'm like, I think this is the time. I think we're okay. And I said, here's the caveat. And I said to her, we have to do it for something. We can't do it for nothing. Like, this is the time when there's no such thing as apolitical. There's no such thing as not being intersectional and not being connected to a cause and a need for change that is happening in our country. And also the fact that Cambodian Rock Band, like, not that she's trying to run from this, but I'm like, Lauren, whether you like it or not, like, the play is political AF. Like, like you may have tried to write a story, like, you know, from the perspective of father-daughter, but being Khmer in the United States is already political. Like, from our connection to other movements, to the fact that, to deportation, to so many reasons why the Khmer body is also political as well, you know? And so I you know, we had this long, serious conversation about it. And I said, you have to do this for something. And so she's like, where do we go for this? And I was like, we need to talk to someone I see right there, Sok. It's nice to see you, Sok. And I was like, you need to talk to Sok. You need to talk to Mekong. You need to talk to oh my God, my brain isn't working right now. Southeast Asian activists, essentially, right? And talk to them about how they are supporting the movement, right? And talk to Dengue Fever and what they want to do with this, because we're going to be asking people to play their music. We'll be asking people to play all these old Khmer songs. And so we had lots and lots of discussions about this. And then we ended up settling on a group from each of those organizations, essentially saying, like, this is what we'd like to support. And so we decided on Moving for Black Lives. We decided on Black Girls Code. We decided on supporting Mekong directly. We decided on supporting a lot of these 4 organizations that essentially just, we're going to go out there and help people out. so CRB challenge came from that. And so we started making the videos and asking people to challenge each other. And Lauren and I even, the cool thing was that our bar was so low. Like, I think we were like, just $1,000, please. Like, we were literally like put like $1,000, I think, at the beginning, and blew past it within the first hour. And then I was like, Lauren, I think we should be like 3,000. And then we blew past that, and we just kept blowing past it until it was like, we ultimately, I think even after, people were still donating after the challenge had ended, and we ended up getting close to like almost like $1,500 or to up to $2,000 per organization too. So yeah, we ended up raising a lot of money for these amazing groups. And yeah, it's a good thing.
And it was also something that was very, it was a tricky balance when we were doing the run of the show in different incarnations, because at one point we, Jane Louie, who's been a bandmate since almost the beginning, created shirts for us because we just wanted band shirts. Lauren was like, I want a band shirt. And so we just Jane designed them, and we just made shirts for ourselves, but then the cast and crew wanted them, and then the audience members wanted them. So it became something that got a little tricky at one point, because we were like, well, we're a band, let's, we'll make merch. But then it became a matter of, well, what are we going to do with that money? Because, obviously there's labor of like, overhead costs, but paying for the literal stuff getting made. But this was a conversation that Joe initiated, because especially because the rest of us also are not Khmer, if we're telling a story and this is commercial theater, and it becomes a matter of profiting off of the pain of a group of people, then how do you reconcile that for yourself? And so throughout OSF, we donated portions of the proceeds to 3 different charities, and Joe curated them. Khmer Alumni Association, our friends Rithi Pita and Kaylee run this through in Long Beach, and Pare Ponlo South Back in Cambodia, and CAGE, Khmer Anti-Deportation Advocacy Group based in Seattle. They're in Seattle, right?
Yeah, up in Seattle. Seattle, Tacoma, yeah.
And all those folks, we've established relationships with over the years, and they mean a great deal to us. And I think, Joe, you and Dice and Ray have all seen Pare Ponlo South Back.
Yeah, Pare Ponlo South Back. That's a little bit of a cheat for me, because it's in my parents' hometown, Battambang. And so because they were there, we had visited, and I had a friend who was connected to CAGE in Washington, and his name is Buntai. And when I was up in Seattle, we had become close friends. And when I found out he was Khmer, we were like, we're brothers. And so Buntai and I we became good friends. And when I was in Battambang, he was like, hey, when you're there, you should go see the circus. And I was like, what are you talking about? So he's like, go to see the circus, the Selpak, and just check it out. And so he even sent there's a man up there, Chamrik Smay, who's one of the teachers there. He's a dance teacher there. He's like, go meet Chamrik Smay, and he'll show you around. And I go up there, and the guy comes out, and he's like, so this is our circus. It is a school. It's an art school. It's a nonprofit art school that gives the kids of Battambang province free education, essentially. Like, literally, we have such a free education system that kids who are too poor to afford school and their parents want to force them to go to work, we give their parents money so that they don't force their kids to go to work. That's like how charitable this organization is. And it really just like seeing this in my parents' hometown and having like just this deep connection to these people, these kids there, I was like, how can we not give it to them? And they were literally like, yeah, we make it our jobs to essentially make Battambang our arts capital again. And so that was their goal. And so, and it's not just arts. They had grown so big through creating every kind of, through working with all these artists and arts, that they founded like essentially a secondary school within the campus that was just essentially like K-8 regular school. So they were like, we'll teach you math and science and stuff too. So it's just like free education for that area that was, really hurting. throughout the years. And so, yeah, that was one of the organizations. CAGE is anti-deportation, and Khmer Alumni Association has been doing amazing work down in Long Beach to award scholarships and to benefit the students of the community.
I think it's something that was very eye-opening to me, Brian, was that I didn't, in much the same way I didn't realize that the events were so recent. In much the same way, when we were meeting survivors and talking to folks, when we had conversations with Bryant Ben, who helms the Killing Fields Memorial Center in Long Beach, I didn't realize he told us stories about how the Long Beach community members are still dealing with the consequences. Very, very, very high rates of PTSD, suicide, high rates of crime. And he would tell us stories about how there's also a language barrier. So folks who are still dealing with the PTSD from surviving the genocide don't have coping mechanisms. And so when the police deal with them, they don't actually, some of them don't have a way to communicate. And so there are really terrible stories that he's shared with us about what happens if law enforcement cannot communicate with a group of people who are dealing with mental health issues because they're so stricken by the events that they lived through. So that was incredibly important to all of us to be able to give back to the community in a way. And Khmer Alumni Association is doing that by fostering the next generation of Khmer Americans. And with Pare Panlo Selpak, I think something that Joe was communicating to us is that there are such high rates of poverty still. You know, this is an incredible resource for the community to be able to have an alternative, so they don't turn to crime, so they don't turn to alternatives, awful alternatives like having to engage in sex work as young people, you know, because that is very real still in the nation. So that was important for us to focus on that organization in Cambodia itself. And then with CAGE, the idea that deportation levels are still so high, and the work that CAGE is doing is so amazing, in doing everything they can with paying for lawyers, doing the advocacy work, doing that necessary community work to help the people who are affected by that and their families. And so it really just opened up my eyes to the need in the community, both in Cambodia still and with the community members who have been in America for generations now. The issues are still very present. So the need is still very great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Brooke, I'll invite you to talk a little more about your work with Be an Arts Hero. And while Brooke does that, everyone, if anyone has any questions you'd like to start writing up, and you know, so we'll have a fabulous question and answer period, I think, after this. Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple friends and I co-founded a grassroots lobbying organization for the arts a couple months ago. We're only about 4 months old. It's called Be an Arts Hero. And it was about late June, early July of this crisis. We were born out of the crisis when we realized that no one was coming to save us. We're all artists, activists, organizers. And we thought, you know, the top Hollywood, you know, execs and Steven Spielbergs of the world and Lin-Manuel Mirandas of the world would come save the arts and culture sector. And that wasn't happening. And rightfully so, it's not their job, right? So we decided that we needed to, in essence, become the heroes that we were waiting for. And so we started a kitchen table movement. And we thought that we realized that there was a gap in our nation, that everyone in the arts and culture sector is advocating for themselves. You know, everyone's siloed off into their own individual lanes. So our unions, even, you know, Actors Equity Association, SAG-AFTRA, et cetera, everyone's advocating for their own members and constituents and their own needs. But we looked around and we thought, well, why isn't anyone bringing the entire arts and culture sector together? Wouldn't we be more effective if we had a collective or a united front that mobilized everyday rank and file blue collar arts workers so they can stand shoulder to shoulder with union leaders, and they can stand shoulder to shoulder with celebrities, and they can stand shoulder to shoulder with every major arts and culture institution in America, small and large. And so we just started hustling, you know, fast and furious all day, every day. And it's reached a point now where we've built a large social media following, but in that we've also become lobbyists. So we've met with over 60 Senate offices, over 20 something House rep offices, and we've developed our own legislation, which we're now in the process of building out. And I can't speak officially about sponsors, but we're garnering sponsors, bicameral and bipartisan sponsors, so House and Senate, Democratic and Republican. And the hope is that through this legislation we're creating, it's called Defend Arts Workers Now, it's the Dawn Act, that we would spray a giant fire hose of sunshine and money across the entire arts and culture sector. Because when push comes to shove, you know, we were the first ones to shut down, we'll be the last ones to reopen, and we have no jobs to return to for the foreseeable future for most of the 5.1 million arts workers in America. And because we're such big business, but we don't receive the relief and investment that we deserve, we realized that there was a huge problem there, and there's something wrong with the conversation, and that we needed to fix that so that we could have a seat at the table. And just talking numbers, you know, I didn't realize that we're one of the largest economic drivers in the nation. And when you take the entire arts and culture sector in America, we contribute over $877 billion in value added to the nation's economy. So with that being said, you know, it does dawn on you, there is something wrong with this equation, and we need to rectify those imbalances. So that's what we're doing. So we're lobbying Congress, we're building coalitions with every institution who will meet with us, every union, every advocacy group, every guild and affiliation that we can talk to at this point. And at the same time, trying to change the conversation with everyday arts workers, because, you know, Brian, you are one, Donatella, Joe, and I, we are all arts workers, but we're trying to redefine the conversation and change the narrative so that we no longer have the starving artist narrative. We no longer have the idea of, you know, I'm an artist, and, you know, I've got my hat in my hand, I've got to, you know, beg for scraps. If you redefine what we do as work, as labor, then you can recontextualize it, right? So that we are an arts economy. We're not just, you know, a bunch of people doing this for fun. It's not a luxury. It's the idea that we are a driving force economically. And so we're here to start re-educating and planting new seeds in people's brains so that we can all collectively demand our worth and start to change this. Hopefully we'll see with the change of an administration, perhaps, that we could have a Secretary of the Arts in a cabinet level position, and we can go from there. So we're in the thick of it now, and we have short-term and long-term goals, but that's what we're up to.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, Joe. So I'll open the floor to any questions that anyone in the audience has for fantastic guests, Cambodian Rock Band, or, oh, okay, here we are. A comment from Ryan Beal: art as an occupation and worthy of economic benefits is such an important mindset. Yes, those are amazing goals. Yes. Thank you, Joe and Brooke. Sort of, you know, while we're talking about that, could you, I mean, what are the ways that we can get involved, us as an audience? I think there are some students here as well, you know, so all across sort of these different platforms, like how do we, you know, what can we do?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm typing our website into the chat right now on my
I'll
phone.
answer, because I've done stuff for Brooke now more than a few times. Despite my greatest fears of phone anxiety, maybe it's this weird millennial thing, but I was on call with senators to try to get them to pass the Dawn Act. And I think that's what we have to do there, you know, like in these times alone, or not even just considering these times, we have to find ourselves to making a habit of being politically more active and engaged. I think I think people are starting to realize how big a hurt can come to you when you're not engaged and, you know, ready to fight for what you believe in, even from the smallest little thing to the biggest thing, and to sort of take small steps to do that. Because like, it's easy to say, you know, I'm not trying to trash anybody, but I'm like, it's easy to say, go vote. That's easy. That's super easy. Go vote, you know, and actually vote. That's you know, the bottom of the barrel. Like, what else do you need to do? Write letters, make phone calls, put political pressure, go protest, like make it happen. Because when they don't see your face and they see you behind a screen or whatever it is, or they hear your voice, that's when it counts. And you really got to get out there and do it.
You know, it's something that has been a recurring realization for me in the course of us working on Cambodian Rock Band, Joe, and what's happening in the nation right now, in the world right now, is there's the idea of, oh, we're going to be fine, or it's not going to hit me, it's not going to touch me. I'm going to be I'm okay. I'm a survivor. I'll find a way, and or turning a blind eye when it's affecting someone else, and that transpires in the course of Cambodian Rock Band, because it is it's about survival, right? But I think about those lessons now, and I think about the idea of how we're all grappling with this crisis that we're all living through right now in America, and it's the idea that, you know, we are dealing with a systemic economic collapse as much as we're dealing with a humanitarian crisis. And the idea that it perhaps hasn't hit you yet right now doesn't mean that it's not going to hit you. And I think that's something that I try to convey when we talk about all the work we're doing with Be an Arts Hero, is that, you know, I'm fine right now. I have an apartment. If push comes to shove, I can stay with my family. You know, I have food in my fridge. I'm okay right now. But for so many Americans and so many people in the world at large, you know, this crisis has pushed them to such a devastating point where they're literally just scrambling to survive right now. So I think something that that I try to impart with anybody who will listen to this point is that, you know, we have an individual and a collective responsibility, right? It's the idea that you might not be affected by this crisis right now, but it's just a matter of when it's going to hit you and how bad it's going to hit you. And everyone on every rung of the ladder is going to be affected. And if I can get on my soapbox a little bit right now, if we just talk about the homelessness crisis, we don't have a stimulus package, and we will likely not have one until well after the election, maybe into the new year. So with over 51 plus million Americans who are unemployed right now, and CNBC reporting that 40 million Americans could get evicted in the coming months, that's in the height of winter with no stimulus package in sight. If 40 million Americans are evicted, that means that 12 out of every 100 Americans could get evicted. And at that point, it would be a 7,000% increase, because the current homeless population in America is around 567,000. So at that point, it's like the COVID crisis. At this point, like everyone we know, you know, our family members, our friends, our neighbors, we've all been impacted by COVID, by the actual disease in some way, right? At this point. But at that rate, if we don't get a stimulus package in the next couple months, if 40 million Americans are evicted, then the homelessness crisis is going to affect everyone we know and love in some way. If it surges like that. So when I say that there's the idea of taking care of yourself and your neighbor, and there's this individual and collective responsibility, it's that the crisis is all around us, and we are perhaps so focused on putting out the fire in our own oven, in our own kitchen, in our own house, that we're not looking out the window and realizing that there's a giant meteor, you know, coming for all of us. So when you ask about what people can do, it's realizing that your individual voice matters. It's realizing that your voice has power. We always encourage people to tweet and tag and call and write their senators, because when we go to these Senate meetings, they'll say, are you the ones who are tweeting us thousands of times, you know, every day? So they have to log it, and it counts for something. And they have to say, Joe No wants, you know, federal pandemic unemployment compensation extension of $600, you know, and so it actually counts for something. So that's a very long-winded way of answering by saying, when you ask what you can do, you know, you can civically engage every day, and it can take 1 minute. Just tweet, and it takes you 1 minute, and it's so easy. And it's now become a cool thing for Gen Zers to do, you know. But I would just encourage people to understand that you have the power to make a difference, and you can do it every day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Everyone, follow along in the chat. There are several links there that you can continue that you can use if you are interested, and I hope you are. But we have a couple of questions now. Jacob Kim is talking about music and music's ability to sort of bring people together. Jacob Kim asks, what was that on your mind when writing the music of the play, particularly the choice to make the songs contemporary rock music?
That's it. I'll answer that very easily for you. We didn't write any of the music for the play. We did direct it. It was directed and guided to a certain thematic structure. For example, like family business, it sort of fits in the moment of that part. Or there's a song called Tooth and Nail, which is a song by Dengue Fever that sort of fits a certain moment, but no songs were written specifically for the play. It's a combination of Dengue Fever songs, which are modern contemporary songs. They're based in Long Beach, and Ode Khmer Odies. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have another question from Gage Aubrey. There's only so much of this show we can experience from reading and listening to the play. A handful of beautiful music was in Khmer. For non-Khmer speaking audience members, was anything being done in the performance to overcome that language barrier in telling the story? If not, how did the nostalgia of the Khmer music land on them?
Well, I will say that at least at OSF, we had transcribed, oh my gosh, what is the word? We traded the lyrics transcribed in English, so folks could understand the Khmer, and then the Khmer lyrics we had them in both ways. So that I think helped facilitate understanding of what the songs were about. And then I don't know, Joe, do you want to address the second part of that question? I need to look at the question in the chat again.
And the nostalgia?
Yeah, what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, so it looks like it's asking how the nostalgia was, if the nostalgia was able to be read by non-Khmer or non-Khmer speaking audiences.
I'd like to think so. Yeah. The thing that's wonderful about the play, there is a universality of music, idea about music being a touchstone for all of us, that it didn't really matter. The only people who were complaining, I heard it once, and I would say from a certain type of people who said like, I wish there were subtitles or something horrible like that, some horrible, disgusting thing that should never be uttered in my presence about this play. I heard that from audience members. But for everybody else, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because you got it from our performances, from our from the moment that Sok just commented in the thing, in the chat, that there were songs that were curated specifically for the moments of the play, and therefore you'll get what you get from it, and that's what we're trying to tell you, and that's really it. So we don't need to like explain, and if you don't get it, then I'm sorry, I guess, but maybe not so sorry. Like if I sing in the play Champa Batambong, right, and I sing it a certain way, and it is related to me and my family's history and the character's connection to loving on Batambong, right, you should get that sentimentality. And if maybe we haven't done our job, if you haven't gotten that, but that is why it exists in the moment. Like, and we have curated those moments. But in terms of actual language, it hasn't really come across that like anybody seriously, watching the play has been like, I don't know what they're saying. Like,
yeah,
who cares?
And it's not the distinction of it's not a musical, right? Because in a musical, and because they serve different purposes on a technical level. In a musical, you have no other way to express yourself, so you go through into song, and typically what you're singing about lyrically has to do with what's happening in the moment of the scene, and it's not the case with this. It's far from a jukebox musical, but in essence, we're using other songs to, I think, serve a purpose thematically, emotionally, or tonally instead of literally. So with all, I would say almost every musical moment in the show, it's not serving the purpose of what it would typically do in a musical. It's just serving the tension and emotion of what's transpiring between the characters in the scene at any given time. So if you look, people would always be like, but I don't know what they're saying in Khmer. I need to know what they're saying in Khmer. If those people were to look at the literal lyrics of 1,000 Tears of a Tarantula, it would not necessarily literally make sense for them to understand what's happening in that moment in the play, because it literally is not supposed to, you know? So a lot of what we did when Jane was making arrangements, when we were working on arrangements together, when we were picking other songs that Lauren asked for feedback on, it was based on what suited the emotional tension of the moment, instead of what made the most sense in a literal fashion.
Yeah, and there are also literally lyrics, I think, in every single program that has been in this play too. So if they really want to like open up their program and follow along, I guess you can listen, like read the English lyrics while it's going on. But yeah.
Oh, we have another question from Ricardo. Cambodian Rock Band was a powerful success for the Cambodian Rock Band was a powerful success for the prevalent Cambodian and Asian American Orange County, I assume, OC communities that surround SCR, South Coast Rep, correct me if I'm wrong, in Costa Mesa. Was a strategy continue this important diversification in US theater in Orange County talked about in 2018? By the way, me and many of my students were there dancing and cheering. It was incredible.
Thanks for coming. I know that for us, it was important to continue Khmer Family Days and Asian American Nights, and to build a sense of community around what the show represented and what it meant to the people who came to see it. So for us, it largely had to do with Khmer community members, students, and Asian people, and not to exclude anyone, because this was such an inclusive experience for all of us. But I felt as though the largest impact we felt was really with those groups in a lot of ways. And so with students, it was exciting to see a lot of young Asian students who saw the show and had never seen a stage full of Asian people, a show written by an Asian person, directed by an Asian person, designed by half of the design team was largely Asian. And these Asian people who weren't just playing immigrants or stereotypical characters, etc., seeing these Asian people who were just humans, who could be rock stars, who could be heroes, who could be villains, who could be fully fleshed human beings. So for me, it was super gratifying when you talk about continuing this communication or community building, Ricardo. It for me, it was so much about connecting with and giving back to the Khmer community, but also connecting with young AAPI students some of whom were seeing a play for the first time, some of whom were seeing Asian people on a stage for the first time, and hearing a part of our history shared on a commercial theater level also was I think integral to a lot of these young people, because a lot of these larger commercial producers only produce shows about white people. So that was meant a lot to us.
I want to also add that this is not meant to be backhanded in any way, but a lot of U.S. theaters in general, I would say, they vote with their dollar a little bit. And to be frank, like what we were talking about earlier in 2017 when we did PPF, it was such a riotous moment when we put Cambodian Rock Band up as a reading. And I'm not even kidding, this was in the paper when it happened. We did the reading, and I think there were, I can't say what those two shows were that were going on at South Coast at the same time. The article literally said, the thing that you should have caught was the reading of Cambodian Rock Band and not those other actual main stage shows. And that said something to both the community, and that said something to US theaters. It was sort of the first shot fired, I think, in some ways for that. And I can't say that while South Coast did their part to make this thing happen, it was very community oriented. Like it was built up from the community, from our respective effort that we put into it, like engaging with Brian Ben and like Jane and Brooke and Lauren went to have dinner with Brian, and like we met with Rithi and Peta, and like we actually had to go out and dig into the community, like literally to the end that there was contention. There were literal days in which was contentious, in which Lauren had to fight for Cambodian days, for the Khmer days. I know that in La Jolla, the reason why we had a double opening day was because there was no other day in which La Jolla was, I don't know about willing, I won't say willing, said that they did not fit their schedule to have a Khmer day, right? A day that Lauren wanted to lock out, essentially, specifically for KAA, for the community to come out and see this show. And she put her neck out and she said, I want this. And they were like, okay, we can agree to the Sunday, a matinee before opening, which we were not supposed to have. So we actually included an extra performance in order to have that. So there are people who are within the play itself, like the playwright and the community, that actually had to fight for that kind of stuff. So to say that there is still lack of interest or drive to push that sort of narrative, it's not 100%. I would say that. That's sort of the kindest thing I can say about it. But we're not all there yet, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to keep up with the chat here. Everyone look out for Donatella's interview with Lauren Yee and Che Yu. We get a wonderful brief snippet before a little bit of a teaser, as it were, in the chat. But everyone keep out on a look for that. I can't wait to read it myself. And so are a lot of other people. Yes, thank you, Ricardo. Great, important points. The fight and struggle during the rehearsal and performance process of breaking these barriers in US theater production and practice is so important to hear. And on that, yeah, let's keep going and let's keep doing the work. But for right now, for this moment, let's join in some Khmer style celebration of wonderful artists with us today. Let's gather around. We can do the Rom circle, you know, everyone, and have some, you know, get some live music going. And just thank our two guests here. Thank Donatella Galella, Dr. Galella, for hosting us at the Center for Ideas in Society and the University of California, Riverside, for hosting just a fabulous, fabulous evening, at least for me, and I hope for so many others. And whenever this play is out again, go and see it, please, everyone. Thank you so much. Akun.
Akun, Samakun.
Thank you so much, Brian, Joe, and Brooke. This was so wonderful. Thanks everyone for coming. We've recorded this and we'll share the video soon. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Soak.
Bye, everyone.